Grateful to be part of this satsang. It's the first time, so I'm a little nervous. Never been on Zoom before like this. But life is full of challenges, and it's always a growing experience. So let's jump in. I guess the format is we begin with a kirtan.
Sure, we can, or we can do it after class, whichever you prefer.
Whatever you suggest, I'm open.
Yeah, we usually do it after class, so we can do it then.
Okay, let's do that. So we'll just jump into discussing sacred sound.
Sure, that sounds great.
That sounds good. Okay. Well, you know, I love the topic, and I appreciate having the opportunity to be part of this discussion. Because I'm very much involved with music as a means to convey Krishna consciousness. But I also see music as an opportunity to connect with Western people who are also entrenched in the Western tradition of music. So I've been studying, for some time now how to do that. And as you mentioned earlier, that the Ramayan, past and present, was an attempt to introduce Krishna conscious pastimes and philosophy through the medium of Western style of music, primarily classical style of music. And it's interesting when you talk about music, what determines, as we know as devotees, what determines whether something is sacred or unsacred, such a word exists, materialistic or material, is how it's used. So if the music is used for the glorification of God, for the glorification of Krishna, then it becomes spiritualized. And this was really the trend in civilization for some time. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe, western part of the world, was plunged into a period of great chaos. But then from 600 AD to approximately the 1400s, music was understood to be solely for the purpose of the glorification of God. And then it wasn't until the Renaissance when music became more secularized. And it's interesting to note that I find that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared at the beginning of the Renaissance in 1486, he introduced a style of worship, which, if you look at it from a historical perspective, is actually very revolutionary. Kirtan is unique in that if you look at the music that was being written for the churches from 600 AD to 1400s, that music, was certainly sacred, but it was a different quality. It was more geared towards creating a mood that was conducive to long periods of meditation and meditative prayer. And therefore you have the Gregorian chants, and if you listen to the Gregorian chants, actually they weren't written by Pope Gregory. They were just given that name to honor him. But actually the chants really are called plain chants. And a plain chant is basically, from the point of view of a musicologist, a plain chant is what we do in kirtan. It's not accompanied by any harmony. It's not accompanied by any instrument except for percussion, which makes it unique. And the reason I say that is because, when Christianity began to evolve, they wanted to distance themselves from what they considered to be pagan religions. And they considered dancing to be pagan, and therefore you would find no dancing in churches, and even today. And I'm not an expert on modern religions, but you don't see dancing like we have in kirtan in any other church or mosque or synagogue. And the reason why at least in Christianity, the reason why the church fathers didn't want to have dancing is because they felt that it incorporated the physical emotions of this world, and it was very much considered to be materialistic. But here we find so then what happened is then the music became more secularized and became more complex in structure and composition in the Western world. However, Lord Chaitanya at that time, he introduced this kirtan, which was still pretty much in the plain chant tradition, but it incorporated the dancing, and it incorporated what the Christians of those areas would consider to be pagan element in worship. But he introduced both dancing and kirtan, the plain chant, as a means of worshiping God. And we see today that this has become very attractive, how people all over the world, come together and they chant, while dancing, while raising their hands, while clapping. And by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, we can feel this divine ecstasy when we engage in this welcoming of the sacred sound of the holy name. And when you think of what sacred sound is, the source of all sacred sound, of course, as we hear in the Vedas, was coming from Krishna. When Krishna, he played his flute, and that came out in the form of Om. And when Lord Brahma sat down in meditation, he heard these divine sacred syllables, tapa. And he engaged in austerity, whereby after such a long duration of time, he finally had a vision of the spiritual world. So this is the purpose of sacred sound in the context of Krishna consciousness, is not simply coming together for worship in terms of religious perspective. And I want to clarify that, because actually Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, as we all know, the famous verse, Sarvadharmam pratyaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. So, generally throughout human society, we see that religion has been used more in terms of religiosity, helping us, and which is not a bad thing. It's pious, but what Lord Chaitanya is presenting to us is a way to use our prayer to transcend all our religious conceptions, our conceptions of religiosity, and simply develop a personal relationship with him, with the Lord, and his devotees. So Lord Brahma, at the dawn of creation, when he chanted the Brahma Samhita prayers, those Chintamani Prakara Sat Masu Kalparaviksha Laksha Vrateshu Surabi Abhipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasambrahma Sevyamanam Govindamani Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. He started to have this divine revelation of the spiritual realm. So the question then is, how is it that we're able to access this divine revelation, this divine experience? So This is the process of bhakti yoga that Srila Prabhupada has given us. And today I just thought as an exercise, I thought it'd be interesting to note what are some of the reasons why we chant Hare Krishna. And then I'd like to, after discussing some of those reasons, and there's infinite reasons. I'm sure many devotees who every day have different realizations and different inspirations that keep them going to chant the Lord's holy name. But I was just going through the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and just noticing, because when we're associating with Krishna through his holy name, actually, as we hear in the Padma Purana, Nama Chintami Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha, that Krishna, he's non-different from his name. So when Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender to me. So how do we do that? That was given to us by Lord Chaitanya. And the process of surrendering to Krishna in this particular age that we live in is through the holy name, because it is non-different from Krishna. So we all can personally surrender to Krishna in our every moment of our lives through the holy name. And once we do that, then we have in the beginning stages, we have access to our original nature, which is eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Sat Chidananda Vigraha. And we are by nature already full of eternity, full of bliss, and full of knowledge. And yet we struggle so much in this world to be free from death. And we struggle so much to be free from ignorance. And we struggle so much to experience happiness. But here, in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada and the founder and all of our preceding acharyas, we learn that we are already full of eternity, full of bliss, full of knowledge. So the purpose of sacred sound is to unlock that original nature of the soul, and enable us to, and once we do that, then we become saturated, we become filled with love for God. And I just remember in 1973 when Srila Prabhupada was in New York, he was talking about, he quoted the song by Narottam Das Thakur, Goloka Premadana Harinam Sankirtana. He said, we must have complete confidence that that the holy name of the Lord is imported from the spiritual world. And we find that devotees take on this mood for approaching the holy name, seeing this as a divine sound vibration imported from the spiritual world. And once we have that confidence, Srila Prabhupada said again, he said, have that confidence. Once we have that confidence, then we start experiencing the divine bliss, the divine enlightenment, the experience of eternality of our soul. It kind of reminds me of about maybe 30, well, actually about 40 years ago in Columbus, Ohio, which is about 3 hours west of New Vrindavan. There's a Ohio State University. And just north of there, Ohio State University built this huge, they call it the Big Ear, okay? And the Big Ear, the purpose of the Big Ear was to just listen to the universe, right? And what happened is, I think it was like in 1960 that they first hooked it up. And for about, 13 years, actually, no, it was like for 16 years, 17 years around that time, just before Srila Prabhupada left the planet, they heard nothing, But then 3 months before Srila Prabhupada left the planet, all of a sudden, on this Big Ear, they registered this signal. And it was called, and they couldn't figure out, the only explanation they have to this day is that it is coming from another galaxy. They call it the wow signal, right? It lasted for 72 seconds. So I was reflecting, how scientists were so excited when they heard this signal, for 70 seconds, coming from another galaxy. They still are dumbfounded, of its origins. And here we have it. Krishna's given us an instrument. Later on, in the 1990s, they disbanded the big ear because there was just not enough data coming into the sound ear. So, but here Krishna's given us an instrument whereby we can pick up this transcendental sound, and we can hear transcendental spiritual sacred sound at every moment. It's a question of opening up the heart, just like you had to hook up the big ear telescope, audioscope, to hear the sound from another galaxy. Similarly, if we want to hear this divine vibration, we have to hook up our heart to the Lord through devotional service. And when our heart is infused with devotional service and a humble spirit and service attitude, then we're able to start hearing these divine sound vibrations that come through Krishna's holy name. Krishna, as we mentioned earlier, is non-different from his holy name. It is Krishna. It is not that it's not a symbol of Krishna. It's not a label of Krishna. Krishna's name is Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he says that when we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna and his internal potency are dancing on our tongue. And this is one of the hallmarks of the Vaishnava teachings that Srila Prabhupada brought us, is that the understanding of God's absolute nature. And oftentimes he's used the analogy, if you chant water, 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 it's not going to quench your thirst. But if you chant the name of God, Krishna, 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 or any name of God, it is non-different from God. And one can, as one purifies the mirror of the heart, one can begin to perceive Krishna's presence. So I'd just like to stop there, take a few moments of reflection. If anyone has any reflections they'd like to share, or any thoughts or questions or clarifications before we move on. Okay. So I'd like to jump into a few, as we mentioned earlier, the Bhagavad Gita has some verses which I just wrote these down to help give myself some personal inspiration into lending my ear to the sacred sound, lending my ear and my heart to the sacred sound of Krishna's name. In the third verse of the second chapter, Krishna says, O son of Prita, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart, and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. So here it is said that Arjuna is he's on this battlefield, and Krishna's telling him this degrading potency of Maya is dragging him down because of his weakness of heart. So when we chant, when we chant, a devotee can take strength and think, yes, by chanting, whatever degrading potency there is in Maya, I can rise above it. There's a beautiful poem by Bhaktivinoda Thakur where he says, Sharagrahi Vaishnava, says, push on thy onward march, O soul, against an evil deed that stands with soldiers' hate and lust, a hero be indeed. Maintain thy post in spirit world as firmly as you can. Let matter never push thee down. O stand, heroic man. And then the last two verses are really beautiful. He says, O Sharagrahi Vaishnav soul, thou art an angel fair. Lead me on to Vrindavan, in spirit's power declare. There rests my soul from matter free upon my lover's arms. Eternal peace and spirit's love are all my chanting charms. Isn't that beautiful?
Yes, it is.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
Very beautiful. I wish I could repeat it.
Well, you know, the fact that you appreciate it means on some level you have the ability to repeat it. You know, but just the thought that Krishna is our eternal lover. He's our eternal friend. You know, my wife and I were just discussing this morning, and she was saying one of the most amazing things about Krishna is that he's everyone's friend. You know, like we can be friend with, you know, maybe the people in our family and the people in our social circle. But whereas Krishna, he's everyone's friend. And he's everyone's friend regardless of what, you know, whether they like him or not. You know, like I remember, Ridananda Maharaj wrote in his book, his commentary, his study guide for the Bhagavad Gita. He says that if Krishna does not take offense if we ignore him. His heart is just full of love, and he's just waiting for us to surrender. You know, and this word surrender, of course, is misunderstood because it immediately brings up connotations of having to subject oneself to an impersonal authority who does not have our best interests at heart. It conjures up images of people surrendering in a war and being subjugated, becoming prisoners of war. These are the connotations. So when I was thinking the other day, well, why does Krishna have to say, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me? You know, couldn't he just said, abandon all varieties of religion and just become my servant? You know, wouldn't that have been a nice, more softer way of putting it? But then I realized that actually the word surrender is most appropriate. That's what Srila Prabhupada translated the word surrender, because surrender means total giving of oneself. Hare Krishna. Let me this is taking a second here. Let me just plug in this iPad here so it doesn't run out of juice. Okay, so yes, surrender is the perfect word. But however, we as conditioned souls, we fear surrendering to anyone because we feel we've been cheated. We were traumatized in our material existence, and we carry those feelings of being traumatized with us birth after birth. So when someone confronts us with the word of surrender, because we don't have a complete conception of God, that God is loving, and that if we do surrender to him, as Krishna tells Arjuna, if you surrender to me, do not fear, do not hesitate, do not worry. Actually, Srila Prabhupada says that in the purport. And in the direct translation, Krishna says, I'll deliver you from all sinful reaction. So surrender comes through hearing the sacred sounds of Krishna's holy name with total in a mood of total submission, with firm faith that by submitting myself to the holy name, by submitting myself to Krishna, I will not get cheated. I know myself that sometimes when I'm chanting the holy name, I'm thinking, well, I have to do this, I have to do that. And oftentimes, if I analyze, if I reflect on why am I thinking about this, it's because there's some motive. It's almost like when we're chanting Hare Krishna, we're endeavoring to break free from the gravity, of this material realm and entering into the spiritual realm. It's like we're almost like you could say we're Atmanauts. Like you have astronauts, they're always going out, but we're going within as Atmanauts. And to break free from that gravity, the gravity manifests itself of the material ego, that gravity of the material ego that pulls us back into this bodily conception manifests itself as fruit of activity. That we're conditioned that I want to get something out of this activity. Whatever I'm doing, how am I going to benefit? However, Krishna consciousness is a complete paradigm shift, but where it's no longer thinking, what can I get out of this activity? What can I get out of this thought that I'm thinking? Because by thinking this thought, I'm hoping I can come up with a strategy to achieve my goals, which will benefit me. Rather, where the paradigm shift is, what will give Krishna the greatest pleasure? What will give my spiritual master the greatest pleasure? What will give my Vaishnava God brothers and God sisters the greatest pleasure? Because we all know without the blessings and mercy of our God brothers and God sisters, how can we maintain a taste for the holy name? Without the blessings of Vaishnavas, I've experienced so many times in my own life, my own spiritual journey. If I offend a Vaishnava, I lose my taste for chanting. My mind becomes disturbed, and it's almost it's instantaneous. Krishna, he's Paramatma in our heart. He's hearing every thought that we think, and he can remove that taste for the holy name. And to have that taste for the holy name is the greatest blessing one can have in this world. I just always love to reflect on the power of Srila Prabhupada's ability to bring Krishna consciousness to the West. And he says in his prayers on the Jaladuta, he begins by saying, "My dear Lord Krishna, you're so kind upon this useless soul. I do not know why you've brought me here. Now you can do whatever you like with me. But I guess you must have some business here. Otherwise, why would you bring me to this terrible place? Most of the population here is covered by the material modes of passion and ignorance. Absorbed in material life, they think themselves very happy and satisfied, and therefore have no taste for the transcendental message of Vasudeva." So this is our position, especially being born in America. I had absolutely no taste for hearing about Krishna. But by the blessings of the Vaishnavas, by the blessings of devotees, gradually that taste is being awakened, and that is the one of the great gifts of the holy name. Like we were speaking about the Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, where Krishna says, "Dehi no sminita dehe kamanam yavanam jara." The embodied soul, as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, similarly the soul passes into another body of death. But the self-realized soul is not bewildered by that change. So similarly, every day when we're chanting the holy name, when we're absorbing our minds in the sacred sound of the holy name, we're preparing for that critical moment when our soul leaves our body. And by this practice of connecting to Krishna through his holy name, we won't be bewildered. so it's such a beautiful process. It's such a great opportunity that we've been given by Srila Prabhupada. So before closing, I would like to, ask for your realizations and hear your thoughts. But I'd just like to share with you, I remember like on my 9th birthday, before I, heard anything about Krishna consciousness, there were people, there were thousands of people in California, which is on the other side of the continent. They were chanting, the mantra they were chanting was "Burn, baby, burn, baby, burn," and the Los Angeles, the Watts neighborhood in Los Angeles was on fire, and it just wasn't in the month of August that happened, but throughout the whole year of 1965, it just started out with a horrible bang. Malcolm X, who was the leader of the Black Panthers, he was assassinated. And the following month, there was a bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, where 600 peaceful protesters were clubbed by the National Guard and hosed down with water. And then that same month, Operation Rolling Thunder was started in Vietnam. It was the biggest military air operation since World War II, and which over 600,000 bombs, tons, not just bombs, but tons, over 600,000 tons, over 500,000 tons of bombs were dropped on North Vietnam. The whole planet was on fire. The Indo-Pakistani War was going on. There was fights between China and Taiwan. The U.S. military had to go to Santo Domingo because there was riots there. There was a rebellion going on in Rhodesia. The whole 1965 was a tremendous time of upheaval. There were people burning themselves. There was in November, December, there were two Americans set themselves on fire in protest, and babies were being burned by napalm. It was a most hellish chemical warfare. It was like this jelly of fire, and once you get it, you can't scrape it off yourself. It just burns you to death. So this was going on, and yet Srila Prabhupada, there was a light of hope. That Srila Prabhupada left India a lone fighter. And all he had an umbrella, he had a suitcase, and he had a box of cereal. Okay, that was his only possessions. But what gave him confidence is he had several trunks of 200 sets of Srimad Bhagavatam, and he was now finally fulfilling the desire of his spiritual master. And what the result was, he was totally up to whatever Krishna wanted, but he was doing what his spiritual master asked him to do, and that gave him great happiness and gave him great confidence. So then the first kirtan took place in 1966. Actually, on this day, October 23rd, 1966, there was the first book distribution that took place. I was reading in the Hare Krishna Explosion that Hari Griva Babu finished the stencils for the first Bhattacharya magazine. And that was either distributed today or maybe the following day. It's not quite clear which was the first day, but Gargamuni, he went out and he distributed, they printed 100 copies on a mimeograph machine, and they sold them for 15 cents a piece. First Bhattacharya magazines, So from a race, and one time Srila Prabhupada said that this all the temples that have come up around the world, all the millions of books that have been distributed, this all come about by chanting. And if we really think about it, Krishna says later in the Bhagavad Gita, Vyavasayamaka bodhir eke kurunanana bhavashakananan buddhyo vyavasayinam, that those who are on this path are resolute in purpose and their aim is one. the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. So by the intelligence of a devotee, we are able to become one-pointed, fixed, and determined, and focusing on Krishna's name. Then we can do wonders. So I believe I've spoken enough. I'd love to hear devotees and hear from you, all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu. I wanted to ask you to comment on the principle that you talked about saragrahi, of being an essence seeker, seeking the essence of the holy name, being non-different from Krishna. And it seems that Krishna himself is saragrahi in the sense that he hears our sincerity more than the material ability to, musical ability or like that. And I remember reading that one time there was a slick businessman in New York that, it's either New York or LA, I can't remember, but he saw the devotees and he wanted to give them a big television appearance and he would make money also. So he told the devotees to get the most musical devotees and the most attractive physically. But then later Prabhupada said, we're not performers, we're meant to, share Krishna. So Prabhupada didn't always stress the musical expertise. Can you comment on that?
Yes, this is a question from the spiritual sky. I love your question. Thank you so much for asking it. And it's so true. What you said, that there's of course the pastime of Duryodhana, when Krishna was coming to Hastinapur, he wanted to offer Krishna an opulent feast, and but because he was motivated, his idea was that I want to get Krishna to come here so I can manipulate him to serve my selfish self-interest. And Krishna immediately picked up on that. Whereas Vidura, he was living in a very humble situation, and all he could offer Krishna was a banana. But when he offered Krishna the banana, he was just so much, his heart was just brimming with love of God and with love for Krishna. And by mistake, he offered Krishna the banana peel. And then Krishna relished that. So, Krishna doesn't, let's just take a second and think about that. I mean, there's living entities in the spiritual sky. They've been glorifying Krishna with music for eternity. How can we ever create anything that can compare to their expertise? We're nothing. The only thing we can offer Krishna is our love. So yes, you're totally correct in bringing this glorious point that it's only Krishna says again and again and again and again. It's only by love and devotion. Patram pushpam phulang toyam. One offers me a love, a devotion, a leaf, a flower, a fruit, a note. I'll accept it. So yes, you're totally correct in what you're saying. There can't be any tinge of false ego in our to be pleasing to Krishna, to really be pleasing to Krishna. There can't be any tinge of false ego in our presentation, whether it be And the thing is that, but if someone is trained musically, and if that's their tendency, and they say, "My Lord, I'm not trying to show off. I'm just trying to do this nicely for your pleasure. Please accept it." If he doesn't in that mood, then why not? Then they can play beautifully. You could get, if everyone in the New York Philharmonic Orchestra had that mood, even though they're playing expertly, if they had that heart, then the music would have so much more impact. It'd be even a billion times more beautiful than the material expertise. Do you have any thoughts or reflections on that, Prabhu, you'd like to share?
I read one there's a story in the Narada Pancharatra where Narada Muni was visiting various demigods, and he came to glorify Krishna by singing. But so he was singing they asked him to chant various pastime songs about various pastimes. So he sang some beautiful songs. And then then he thought they were finished, so he started to leave, but they said, no, we want you to sing the song about when Krishna left Vrindavan from a tour and the gopis were trying to stop him from going and all that. So then he started to sing that song. And as he was singing, he was a very expert musician and singer, but when he was singing that particular song, there was the mood of separation from Krishna. So he had his voice started breaking up and his musical, rhythm was interrupted by his ecstatic symptoms. And all the demigods got angry at him because they were listening to the kirtan and they were appreciating the nice musical sound also. And so they sort of cursed him, but then Krishna appeared and protected him. But I was just thinking, but there was a story where Narada Muni did austerities to try to perfect the musical arts. And, the ideal thing, as you mentioned, is if someone has devotion and also musical ability, then that's a wonderful combination.
Yes. Thank you.
Maybe someone else has something to ask or.
Yes. May I?
Please.
I would like you to say something about your Ramayana presentation, which was given in the flyer that you're going to produce, or is already scheduled or something like that. Say something about Ramayana because I love Ramayana.
Oh, okay. Well, it was, I would say, a most satisfying experience for myself personally to be able to see all the students at this university hearing about Lord Ram and his pastimes for the first time through this musical. In fact, the student who played Hanuman, he was the president of the student Christian Association, but he had a beautiful tenor voice. And he said, in one time he said to me, he called me John because that was my name there. He says, John, I don't know what to do. Every time I go to church now, I hear Sri Ram, Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Ram.
Me too.
Yeah. And,
Jai Shri Ram.
yes. And in fact,
I play Hanuman too.
you play Hanuman too.
I play. Yes, that's what I do. Monkey, Jai Shri Ram.
Yes. So Hanuman, he's we had a professor. He played Jatayu, and another professor played Mantara. And so anyway, so it was very well received. We did 4 performances. So I can't say much more about it except that after I graduate from Westerbury, I plan to what we did was technically called a workshop production, where you put a musical on its feet for the first time, and then you go back and you edit. So there's a couple more things I need to do to before I say goodbye to it, in the sense that I think, okay, I'm done. And then once I do that, I'd like to, try to offer it to different theater companies and see if they like to take it on as a project. But ultimately, I would love to do it with devotees, because I think having devotees involved would bring it to the spiritual highs, a much higher spiritual platform. Even though I felt that it was good, it was a wonderful experience for the students to get that exposure. And of course, they got prasadam. We served them every night. New Vrindavan cooked a wonderful prasadam for the students. And, they said in 40 years, they never seen so many faculty come to a performance. It was very well received. Some students would see it 3 times, and I think this is something that devotees around the world now are beginning to develop their skills in different areas, and I'm hoping that we'll see more of. And it's already going on. I mean, we have devotees already setting, doing much greater service, like with Discover India. Actually, after the performance of the Ramayana at West Liberty, Krishna let me help arrange for Indrajuna Swami to come, and his group came, and they did the Discover India presentation, and they also, the students loved it. In fact, the faculty, the chairman of the theater department said to me, we should do it every 3 years. We should do something from the Vedas. So
Wonderful. I played Hanuman for hours and hours, and some of these local people here in Texas, those guards and all that, they come to me, how come you Indians can celebrate so much, so many hours? I said, I don't consider it a job. I'm having fun. When you have fun, time flies.
yes. Well, I hope I get a chance to see you play Hanuman someday.
This is COVID year. Nothing is happening.
That's true. Yeah. When the dust clears.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Any
Well,
other comments or questions?
We have a question from Jenya also. She asks, do you believe that music attracts young people more than mere words?
well, getting back earlier to Sarvabhauma's question, it can, provided it's done with, with a pure heart. It has a tremendous, as we see just from historically, how music has played such a crucial role in Christianity for us, helping attract people to the church. And we see an example in our Vaishnava tradition, how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has inundated India with large Harinam Sankirtan processions, and there was the roaring of the holy name. So there are so many different types of music which, if they become infused with that spirit of bhakti, and those forms of music can become tools to help, people of all varieties. But that the purity, Srila Prabhupada said, books are the basis, utility is the principle, which, as a musician, I try to utilize, whatever tools are available to me. Books are the basis, utility is the principle, purity is the force, and preaching is the essence. So the purity and the goal there, the goal is by the performance must be to open hearts to receive Krishna's love. And of course, that begins by ourselves becoming Krishna conscious. I hope that answers the question. Does that help?
Yes, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. I know I can relate because I listen to a lot of music, and before I came to Krishna consciousness, I was kind of visiting different types of temples with different types of tunes and chants, and there's a lot of great music out there, but the message behind it is really glorifying, and idolizing Maya, and I found that chanting, the Maha Mantra was so much more satisfying. You didn't really need, big lights. You didn't really need a lot of, synthy and electronic production. Definitely didn't need, like alcohol or drugs or kind of like rowdy friends or anything like that. It was very pure. So, like you said, I think if we could transfer, that, all the wonderful music talent there is, and combine it with, greater consciousness, it could be really powerful.
Yes, I thank you so much for that greater consciousness. Yes.
Mhm.
And I just want to add one more thing, which I thought you might find of interest.
Mhm.
We were talking earlier about COVID, and sometimes these epidemics are signals for a change in civilization. And I was just reading this morning how in the 1300s you had the bubonic plague, the Black Death was sweeping through Europe, and that signaled, among other things, it was one of the things that signaled a change in Western civilization from the autocratic, almost you could say almost the Western Europe was being ruled by the Church authority of Rome, and the Black Death started making people think about, well, there must be other ways of going about things. It was one of the reasons historians say that the church lost its power. So, even though this COVID is a horrible thing, and the point I'm trying to make actually is that, so music sometimes goes through cycles, and like you were saying how music was very meditative, and like when done with higher consciousness, the simplicity, that's how music was for thousands of years, and then we got into this complex mode. But they say, the historians are saying now that things go in cycle, and maybe we were going to see a shift, getting back to more of using music as a means of attaining higher consciousness.
Definitely. And I think, on that, I mean, it's really interesting because I think, the electronic music scene kind of, and just music in general, it became very complex, lots of words, and still, it's, a lot of the same kind of like tropes around, like sex and enjoyment and, getting wealthy and all these things. But there's also kind of like an underground developing where there's music without words. It's very, more meditative, but still like electronic, it still has kind of like the same crowd, but I think you're starting to also find there is a like, the Western, kind of like spiritual, and yoga community is starting to actually pick up on like, techno and like progressive house because, it's stuff that you can actually do asana to, or stuff that, they can go and, feel like they're in a meditative state. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, you're definitely starting to see, at least in some genres, that folks are starting to turn towards that style of simplicity.
Right. Right.